Thank you for joining us on the Winning at Selling podcast. I'm Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems, and with me is Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute.
Ever ask yourself how you won or lost a sale as you walk back to the car? As you debrief, what are you concentrating on, and what do you want to repeat or regret and refine before you apply again? What can you control? How can you be better prepared? And how do you increase your chance of making more sales in less time? If these are the questions you ask yourself every day, today is your day, as Bill and I consider when good sales calls go bad on episode 596 of the Winning at Selling podcast.
Well, Scott, that sounds interesting. I hope people actually reflect on when they win or lose a sale, other than kicking stones on the way back to the car and saying those idiots just didn't know what they were doing.
That's right. It's always somebody else's fault too, isn't
it?
That's
right. Guy that looks at his glove when he misses a ball.
Right?
Yeah. Looks at his golf club when it goes into the woods. Well, I gotta get me some new clubs.
Right.
Yeah. Well, before we get into that, we're looking at the book club, and that is The Go-Giver by Bob Berg and John David Mann. We're on chapters 3 and 4, which is the first law of stratospheric success. So before we go into that, I want to set the scene a little bit. So our protagonist, Joe, this is done in story format, and Joe is going to learn from the very wealthy Pindar how to be wealthy or how to have success. And he's got 5 laws of stratospheric success. And there's a condition on his learning, and that is that he applies this every day. So day 1 here, he's going to learn what the first law is. He's been promised he's going to go meet a wealthy real estate magnate. And so Pindar takes him to an Italian restaurant where they meet the chef and owner, Ernesto. And Joe learns that Ernesto started out with just enough money to purchase a hot dog cart and a license. And now he's got a great restaurant. So he says, what did you do? And he says, well, I made the hot dog cart the best outdoor dining experience in the city. I took what little I had and I did a great job with it. And then people saw this and they wanted to invest in him, people including Pindar. And now he's the real estate magnate, and he owns millions of dollars of real estate in the city and 4 restaurants. And he says the key to his success is the first stratospheric law of success, the law of value. And the law of value says your true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment. So are you giving great value, great worth for what you're giving and getting in payment? And Ernesto says you have to give. And Joe takes Pindar back home, is reminded of the condition. He's got to use the principle in the same day. And that afternoon, he finds out he lost a deal. But remembering the condition, he gives that person who he lost the deal, who didn't give him the deal, another name of someone who might be better suited. So the question is, what does this law of value mean to us in sales? How can we express this condition, or how can we express this law of value in what we give? We don't usually set the prices, so we can't give you more. And is that a good way to do business? You buy 1, I give you 2. I don't know. So that's the question. All right. So what do you think, Scott? How can we apply this law of value when we're just kind of the sales guy out in the territory?
Well, I think the important word here is experience. And when we create better experiences, we create better memories, and people, I think, gravitate towards an experience where they reflect on it fondly. I think about the importance of storytelling. Or I was watching the news today, and there was a real estate agent being interviewed about selling a house on Summit Avenue. And this real estate agent was just kind of really unfamiliar with the home. And then all of a sudden he started talking about a story about who owned the home. And then it became interesting because of the experience through a story. So I think that's what really carried a lot of weight in this chapter. But I just love the saying about really delivering more than you get payment for.
I think what we can really do is, like Ernesto developed the greatest dining experience. What is your sales experience? Mm-hmm. Are you trying to do the minimum amount of work to get the sale? Or are you trying to maximize the value that your expertise is giving? Like that real estate salesperson, when they got into the story that you mentioned, they started to become more of an expert. When they talked in vague generalities, they weren't.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so what is your story? What is your experience that you're giving customers? Are you showing them that you really care, or are you just trying to get the best deal for yourself and then move on to the next one?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I see a lot.
Bill, have you ever met these people that, want to make as much money as possible and they want to kick back on everything that they sell, or they end up repping other products for other people and then they want to commission on everything that they sell? And it's just like their whole goal is to make money, is to take, versus what is the best source of information that people can use to be able to become better at their life or their job or whatever. It's too many people are like, join my group and I'll give you 15% of everything that you sell. And it's like, I'm not interested in doing that. That's not my motivation. I want to be able to deliver value to people, not make a lot of money. And that's a different focus. And this book is really affirming that. And I'm really starting to see that in this chapter about really concentrating on how much can you give away for the payment that you receive and still be profitable. Is a different paradigm. It's a paradigm shift for people to think about.
Well, and I think we can be profitable.
Absolutely.
But it's the things surrounding the sale for most salespeople. It's the intelligence that you bring. It's the solutions that you help provide. It's not just, I'm going to get so much money for this product and I hope you keep buying it forever because you're an OEM. It's, I'm going to bring in my engineers to help you to make sure we sell you the right thing and make sure that the delivery method and the way we pack it is all going to be valuable to you. And I think the thing where this really helps us in sales is when we create a reputation that says Scott is the kind of person that's going to give me everything he has. Even if I change companies, I'm probably still in the industry. And I've known many salespeople who've grown solely because they're the people that they serviced moved to other companies and brought them into that company. And they just kept, because people move all the time between employers, but they don't always change industries.
Right. I think that, there was a great line in this chapter about having a greater passion for what you're giving rather than what you are getting. And this is, really, I think the difference between joy and happiness. Joy is something that you experience regardless of the conditions. The giving in the selfishness of giving is joyful. And then there's happiness, which can be more of a secular achievement. And sometimes happiness doesn't last as long as joy does. And there's a real difference between the two, but sometimes they get confused.
I think you can tell, we just went through the Christmas season. For most of us, we had some kind of a Christmas celebration. Were you more worried about what packages were for you under the tree?
No, didn't even look at it.
Or were you, I don't mean you, Scott, as a person. I mean, in general to our listeners.
Yeah.
What were you thinking about on Christmas morning? Were you
right.
thinking about what do I got under that tree? Or were you thinking, I can't wait till X opens my present to see the look on her face or to see the joy that he's expressed because I really thought about something valuable for them. And there's some people out there that are really good gift givers. They really think and listen and focus on other people. And that's what giving has to be. If you're going to, Ernesto didn't think about how much am I going to make off this hot dog cart. He thought, how can I make this an experience that people will want to come back to and bring their friends to? How can we make our buying experience something that people say, man, when I worked with that person, when I worked with her, it was the best experience I've ever had in sales. She wasn't focused on just getting something done and moving on. And I see so many companies where, you kind of got the salesperson and then you got the service team. And the salesperson can't wait to chuck this over to the service team so they don't have to mess with this person again. Because then the account service team is going to take care of them. I go look for that next prospect.
Right.
And that's all they're thinking about. Hey, Scott, you bought, goodbye. I'm moving on to my next prospect.
I mean, Ernesto remembered all of the children's names and their birthdays of all the customers that he had. And you think about how much work that took to memorize all of that and to keep that top of mind and to be able to recall it without being, without knowing when it's going to prepare for it. And it's a certain experience that he creates in every conversation that you have with somebody. And you have a choice. Everybody has a choice when they're talking to somebody. Are you happy? Are you fun to be around? Are you fun to live with?
Mm-hmm.
Are you fun to work with? And that's all of a choice that we have. And that delivers value to other people. Is, we have to be happy. It's an obligation to be happy and to be joyful in our behavior, because if we're not, what kind of contribution are we really making to the world? Not very good.
And our main character, Joe, he's got that attitude of what's in it for me? What's in it for me? What's in it for me? Now, here's something I want to warn people about when they're giving value, when they're helping other people, when they're going outside of just being a salesperson. There won't always be a direct correlation between where you put in the work and where the benefit comes from.
True.
It won't be direct, or it won't always be immediate. Sometimes those relationships happen over time, and something you did for somebody else, it moves through the system, and all of a sudden, bing, over here, you get a piece of business. You don't even know where it came from. You probably couldn't even trace it back, but you got it because you were out there doing the right thing. And I think there's a payback system in the world that if you put out good things, you're going to get good things back.
Well, you must be present to win. if you're not present, you don't win. So get out there and talk to as many people as you possibly can. Start as many conversations as you can. Start the relationships, and then through the relationships and the conversations end up coming, the results with that go-giver attitude that people in your network are going to remember you by.
So the first law of stratospheric success, the law of value: your true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment. So we'll go to the second law in 2 weeks, because next week we're going to have a guest. So
yeah. Great book, Bill. I'm really enjoying it so far. And the first law is very applicable in today's marketplace. It's amazing how some of these books just maintain sustainability over time as the market changes. And it's hard to really predict what the future is going to be. But what a great book. I'm literally looking forward to the next few chapters. Our topic today is on when good sales calls go bad.
Never happens to me.
I think we've been there more than once, where we think, wow, this is really great. And
I do a podcast about sales, so I never lose a sale.
Right. Yeah. I think our best experiences are when we don't win.
Sometimes that's true.
And we debrief. But I've, in my years, and it's amazing, the contrast between my experience and the experience of other people. And sometimes I compare myself to other people around my same age, and that's not always good. But there have been some people that have been selling for 25 years. Unfortunately, it's the same freaking week over and over and over again. They've been doing it 1,300 times, and they don't really learn anything. They just kind of talk. They show up and throw up, as we've said. And they don't really debrief a sales call as to what they did good and what they want to refine before they end up repeating it. And
well, that's the condition, right? The condition from the story.
It is. Yeah, exactly.
When you're having a bad sales call, are you learning from it, or are you just blaming the clubs?
Right.
Are you doing something different with each of these podcasts? Or you just write down one thing? If you just wrote down one thing from each thing you listened to and said, I'm going to do something different based on that.
Yeah, imagine if we had a condition that everybody that listens to the podcast has to apply something that they learned the same day.
That's right.
Pressure. I can't do it. Too much pressure.
There you go.
It would be very applicable. So I've put down 11 different areas that people can consider developing or improving on. And these days there's a mantra that I've heard more than once, is that we learn, we unlearn, and then we have to relearn. And sometimes as the market changes, we need to adapt our sales style and our sales skills and the conversation, like in this chapter, on the conversations that we have with people, to be able to deliver the best value and to increase our chances of really closing more sales, shortening the sales cycle, increasing the closing ratio. So I'm going to go through 11 of them, Bill, and I'll ask you to comment on each one, add
All
to
right.
it, and we'll go from there. So the first one is a lack of understanding of prospects' need. There's no reason to change, and the salesperson gives no compelling reason why anybody would ever want to make a change as to what they're currently doing. They really lack the needs, and we always hear, we got to peel the onion, we got to peel back the pain, we got to drill down on the pain. Well, okay, that's true, but if you have a conversation and you never uncover any needs that the prospect has or any reasons why they would want to make a different change, why would they want to continue the conversation? Have you ever talked to salespeople like that, Bill?
Well, I think that if we don't prepare, it's going to be more difficult to find that reason for change. And for me, preparing is writing down 8 to 12 questions that I can ask that will lead the conversation in a logical direction. Because whenever I get into the sale, the prospect tends to want to take me off track. And I'm glad to let them go off track, but I have to have a track to move myself back on. So finding that reason to change can be difficult. Maybe we got really good at setting appointments, or we have somebody who's setting appointments for us. And I've been in front of a client before, a prospect before, who said, I don't really know why I said yes to you. Just really good on the phone,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I can't really think of something that we need. And sometimes you'll walk out of an appointment where you don't find that need, but generally you should be able to if you've got a good set of questions to ask, rather than let me show you what I got. Let me show you what I
Right.
got. When I show you something that you need, you tell me. You stop me when you've heard enough.
Pick a
So it's
card.
all in the questioning. It's all, and sometimes you just can't find it, or it's not
Yeah.
a good fit.
Right, right. Yeah. So they just don't uncover the prospect's needs. The next one, number two, is poor product knowledge. They're unable to communicate the features, benefits, the advantages, and the overall value proposition clearly, where somebody can paint a picture in their head about what's going to happen when they end up having that product or service. And they don't do enough understanding about what their product does and the problem that it sticks to. They talk so much about the solution. Sometimes they don't have an understanding about the product overall, and products have value when they stick to a problem.
Yeah, that's what I would say. It's the word that came to mind for me, Scott, was connectivity, which you're calling stickiness, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and what's happening is it's not I don't know the product. I've learned the features and benefits. I've learned the feature benefit, but I haven't learned how to recognize what the prospect is saying that will then turn into a connectivity that I can make. And I'm too anxious to find it early. That's the
Right.
other thing. I
Yeah.
find a little gap, a little possibility, and I start to fill it with product. And I don't wedge that gap open and try to find out what the deeper issues are. So it's I don't know if it's always poor product knowledge, but I think you're right. It's that inability to stick it together with what the customer is telling you.
Right, right. And to paint a picture in the prospect's mind as to what they can imagine when they have that product or solution as part of their ownership. And unfortunately, sometimes salespeople go overboard on product knowledge. They end up becoming product managers, and they end up becoming almost scientists or engineers when you don't need to know that much when you're in a sales opportunity. You know enough to be able to convince somebody that this is a good risk for them to make from buying from you. And that's the goal. What is the goal? Enough information for somebody to say yes. And then you've achieved the goal, and then you want to move on.
Right. Right.
The next one, number three, is poor listening skills. And we've all heard this before about salespeople talking more than they're listening. And poor listening skills, when we do that, we're not building that trust and rapport early on. We're not creating a memorable experience for the salesperson, for sure. The prospect is looking at it going, this is a terrible salesperson. I don't ever want to buy from them, and I'm going to remember this forever. But the salesperson is not engaged. They're not going to remember this experience at all because they're not listening to what that prospect is saying. And you need to be able to have active listening to build trust with a prospect, because if you don't, you're not going to get honest answers. So practice your listening skills and just learn to shut up.
I spent a number of years teaching public speaking, and we worked in 2-minute segments. So all of our little speeches in this class were 2 minutes long, and you really get an idea what 2 minutes is, and that's a long period of time for you to be talking to your prospect. I would recommend that you start working in sound bites of 2 to 3 sentences, And if you're saying more than 2 or 3 sentences, you're going on too long for that prospect and they're already getting bored.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 or 3 sentences, move on. And this is where I have the challenges you were talking about with product knowledge. The more product knowledge we have, the more we want to talk. Sometimes not
Right.
knowing anything is a benefit because all you can do is ask questions.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
then say, well, listen, I'll have to go back and talk to some people and take your information back and we'll put it together. So I think, again, if you prepare questions, you're going to ask more questions. And if you want to say something, end it with a question. What do you think of that, Scott?
Right, right. That's so true. And say, and a salesperson can say to a prospect, I want to say yes to your question. I want to make sure that it's the right answer. So let me check on it. I'll get back to you and I'll let you know about some of the conditions that we may need in order to make that happen, or if we can just take it right out of the box and make it work. So
Right.
let me get back to you on that. And now you're creating that anticipation and that excitement for the prospect to be able to get something that they're looking for. And you're not misrepresenting what you're doing because you checked everything out based on what they're looking for. Number 4 is outdated sales tactics. I mean, have you ever heard this from a salesperson? What's keeping you up at night? Or if I could show you a better way, would you make a decision today? No, that doesn't work
Well,
anymore.
you can't use your Earl Nightingale voice when you do, or who's the guy you like?
Zig Ziglar's.
You fell into the Zig Ziglar voice.
Yeah.
There,
so I got on my talking pad. God,
so if you
Zig.
say those outdated phrases in an outdated way,
right,
I think you're always going to sound outdated.
Jeez.
The question, what's keeping you up at night, is not a bad question. It's just been overused.
It has.
So you need to find a different way to say that, to get out that challenge that person is talking about. And again, I'm going to go back to it. It's the 3rd time I've said it out of one of these. Prepare your questions. You won't fall into bad habits, because you'll think when you put down what's keeping you up here, and you go, no, that's too old fashioned. Let me find a new way to say that, a way that meets the needs of our customers, that isn't just a generic question. That's what I find so often when we're teaching. People say, well, this all sounds canned. Yeah, it all sounds canned because you're making it canned.
Right.
You're not making it come alive. You've got to make these things change a little bit with the vernacular of your business.
Mm-hmm. And I think, I need to tip my hat to our listeners, because they're listening to the show because they want to update their sales tactics and they want to be able to maintain relevant sales skills in today's marketplace. So I'm grateful for all of our listeners. Thank you for that. Number 5 is they're overly committed to unqualified leads. The best way to not have to prospect or to not have to make cold calls is to accept every lead as qualified. And then you end up clogging up your pipeline. And guess what? You don't have to prospect anymore. You've got a bunch of leads that will never buy from you, but you touch base. And you just wanted to check in, and you just wanted to see if anything's new or different or changed since the last time you talked.
And you're unwilling to get them to make a decision, because then you don't have anything in your funnel anymore.
Right. You don't want to spoil the relationship because you've been calling on them for 9 months. It's like, it's the holidays.
And they'll take your call. So they actually take your call to tell you, I'm still thinking.
I want to get that bin of popcorn because the holiday season's coming up and I don't want to do anything to disrupt the relationship.
Yeah, that's right.
But that's right. So often we have to have an attitude going into a conversation of this may or may not be a fit. My goal is to find out as soon as possible. And to be able to have that curious outlook and attitude when you're talking to a prospect and say, I don't want to assume that you're having any problems in this area, that you even need my help. Can I ask you a few questions? And now we're going to be able to determine if this is a qualified prospect or not. And is this the right time or is it later? So really think about how qualified of the leads in your pipeline, and don't be overly committed to ones that are not qualified.
I think this should be a growth area for people. When you're new to a sales area, when you're new to selling, you're going to get a lot of unqualified leads as you practice and try to figure out over time what a qualified lead looks like. But if you've been doing this for a couple of years and you're still filling your calendar with people who just said yes, you're not growing as a salesperson. And so then you're not going to change and get those better qualified leads, which lead to a quicker close rather than the 5-year, gee, I have a really long closing cycle. Yeah, because the guy wasn't ready when you sat down with them. So
right. Yeah, the next one is number 6, mishandling objections. They confuse buying signs with reasons to buy. And there's misconceptions, there's skepticisms, and there's drawbacks. I mean, those are the top three types of objections. And if we don't handle those objections appropriately, we could disrupt the entire buying process that we've worked so hard to establish with a prospect. So know what objection you're talking about before you end up responding. Because if you don't know what you're talking about, they don't know what they're talking about. Or if you don't know what they're talking about, you don't know what you're talking about. You see, the miscommunication in that is creating confusion. And when there's confusion, there's no action. People just do nothing.
Well, the real challenge with these is when they come at the end of the cycle, when you're hearing, well, I thought about buying, but I have this problem with your product, right?
Mm-hmm.
What have you been talking about with this person for the last couple of meetings? If these haven't come out early, then you're not having good conversations. Right. You're not getting these things out. You're trying to close something before it's ready to be closed. And a good sales process, these things come out earlier in the cycle, and you find out about them, and you can deal with them and have a conversation about them. And you don't have to go through this drum roll of, can you handle this objection? Can you handle that objection? These objections came out. Now, if they come at the end, they're negotiating tactics.
Right.
And they're just a way to kind of draw you in and make you drop your price a little bit. So be careful about how bad or good your conversations are. If these aren't coming out early, you're just not finding out what you need to find out.
Yeah. And the best way to handle an objection is before it comes up. So like Bill said, sometimes it's positioning and posturing or negotiating, but deal with it before it comes up.
Yeah. If you tell me, hey, I always get this objection, well, then you're not dealing with it right. You're causing that objection more likely than not. Yeah. Right. The old kid that comes to the door, you wouldn't want to buy a candy bar, would you? You're just causing the objection.
Yeah, exactly. Number 7 is no follow-up. If you don't act like it's important, how do you expect them to act like it's important? How many times do I get a phone call? I may get a voicemail message. Sometimes I don't get voicemail message because they're spamming calls. But if they leave a voicemail message, do they ever call back and check in, follow up, and find out, if this is an interesting topic for me, and demonstrate a commitment by your persistence? I'm testing you. If you're leaving me a message and I don't call you back right away, I'm testing you to see how committed you are. If you don't call me back, I made the right choice. You're not committed. I'm not going to commit to you because you're not committed. But we need to really follow up.
Do you have some quality follow-ups? Do you have some other information that you can bring? Hey, Scott, I know we had a great conversation. I wanted to check in. I've got a really interesting article I want to send you, but I don't want to, send you stuff that they're not interested. So call me back. Let me know if you're interested, and I'll send you this article. What value, again, what give? What are you willing to give to keep this relationship building? Or are you just ready for that sale? Hey, just following up to check in, see if you're ready to buy. Got my order book ready. So if you're ready to buy, I can write up that order right now.
Exactly. And it's so common. What I've done in conversations where I talk about a book that I've been reading and the impact of the book with a prospect, I'm like, wow, that's really interesting. I'll have to check that out. And of course, they won't check it out. But what do? You go on the internet, you order the book, you have it shipped to them, and then when it's going to be delivered to them, and you forward that email on to them saying, I really enjoyed our conversation, and I mentioned this book, and you expressed an interest in it. I wanted to buy you a copy of the book, and I hope that you have as much enjoyment reading it as I did. Now, every time they look at that book, they think of you. And how much did it cost? Well, it ranges on how much the book is. But that is a really inexpensive way to have a memorable experience with information that's relevant for both people involved in the conversation. It's very, very simple to do. Number 8 is mismatching a customer's communication style. Have you ever met somebody that talks really slow? And I'm a fast talker. And sometimes low energy salespeople talking to fast talking prospects that are in high pressured positions is a real mismatch. And that dominant, fast-talking prospect is not going to have the patience to listen to somebody who talks slow. And we need to be able to match that communication style in order to maintain that communication cadence, because if we don't, we're not in sync with that other person. And then when we're not in sync, we're sinking. And it ain't going to turn out well if we don't match their communication style.
I had a friend of mine who was selling in New York, and this was the day of the slide projector presentation.
Yeah.
And he was talking to this New Yorker, and the guy just kept saying, "Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on." And finally, he just held his button down the slide thing and was going through the slides. And the guy said, "That's about right."
That's great. For some reason, I can hear that slide coming in and out of the machine as you're saying that.
Yep. That's right.
Ka-chink,
As fast as you can hold it down.
Wouldn't that be a great prop to have as a presentation? Roll out a cart with a slide projector on it.
I brought my overhead projector with my slides on it for you.
Yeah, exactly. All right, number 9 is they're unfaithful market ambassadors with the competition, which means their failure to separate prospects' needs, your solutions, and what other options are available. Their negligence drives them to the competitor. The negligence of having a conversation with the prospect drives the prospect to a competitor because you as a salesperson are not knowledgeable of what's going on in your marketplace. Be a market ambassador. Know what's going on in the industry. Know what's going on in the development of the product that you're selling and the development of other products to be able to maintain that strong value proposition. And you have to be familiar with who the competition is, because the competition are other options that your prospect is considering. So always be in a position to create options, not pick them. And when you work with a prospect to do that, and you do it in a way where you're leading them in the decision, they're going to be more loyal to you and your advice that you give them. So keep that in mind every time you're talking about the competition is, do you really know what's everything going on in the marketplace?
Yeah. And I would direct you to podcast 595, dealing with a competitive sale. Everything I have to say about competitive selling is in podcast 595.
Great episode. Greatest episode. Number 10 is poor confidence. If you don't challenge them, you don't change them. And prospects don't look at a salesperson as having the experience to change, having the confidence to change. When you're asking a prospect to do something different, they're taking a risk. As the instigator, if you're not painting that picture in a way where they have confidence that you're going to be the guide during that vulnerable moment, they're not going to have confidence in buying from you. And confidence is a learned skill. It's not something that you're born with, but you have to have enough experiences and take enough risks to be able to gain that confidence, because through the experiences that you have outcomes. And the more you're able to tolerate and deal with negative outcomes, the more confidence you're going to have and the more positive outcomes that you're going to create because of those experiences.
Yeah. The word I use is posture. You go hat in hand. Oh, I really need you to make this sale. And it's a lot easier to have good posture when your sales are already good. When you're, begging for that last couple of sales for the week, it's hard to have the posture, but try to maintain your own posture. What is your attitude and how do you come across the client? Are you needy? You're going to have to lower your price. If you're needy, if you feel needy, you're going to have to give something away. So watch out.
And guarded. Salespeople, if you're meeting somebody and you're wearing sunglasses, take off your sunglasses just for a moment, just so they can see your eyes. Because if a person can't see your eyes, they're not going to trust you. And how many salespeople have I talked to in outdoor conditions? In most cases, they don't take off their sunglasses. And then the last one is number 11, lack of public commitment to their profession and their reputation. I mean, these people
a lot more now.
Yes, people just staying in their basement and they're not being accountable to the marketplace. Get your butt out of the basement and get involved in a group and show your face in a group in an industry that you're committed to, and you're going to be able to make that public commitment.
I think you just feel so much more alive when you're out in public. You're meeting people. I just think that for sales, that you talked about confidence, call it posture. You're not going to get that by spending your time by yourself.
Right.
You can only get those things by meeting other people. So great points.
Yeah. So those are my 11. I'm curious, any listeners that are struggling in other areas, Bill and I welcome them. We'll even, if it's enough people volunteer, we'll do a special episode on it.
As we wrap up today, we have our golden nugget. This is from Aldous Huxley, who was an author. Facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored.
Oh, so true.
So man, I think we can all do that. We get into we make a decision, and then we just only look for the facts that support our decision.
Validate
so be careful
it.
That.
Yep. So everything that we talked about is going to be at winningatselling.com. This is episode 596. Highly encourage you to check out PSA, Professional Sales Association, PSAMN.org. We're going to have Dave Cornell at our next meeting in January, and we've had him on the show before too.
And you can, if you doesn't matter where you are, because you can get online, we'll do it as a webcast.
Yeah.
Next week, no book club, but the week after that, we're going to do chapters 5, 6, and 7. So 3 chapters the next week. And our guest for next week is Eric Harkins, and he is a great speaker. I'm really looking forward to that. Please subscribe and share this podcast with your colleagues and on your social media. Go out and get better one skill at a time.
Joyful selling.